Welcome to the Coming Home Well podcast with your guest host, Tish Hevel, CEO and founder of the Brain Donor Project. Join Tish as she talks to veterans and veteran caregivers about the importance of brain donation to help researchers learn more about brain injuries and diseases that affect our veteran community. Now, here's your host, Tish Hevel.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of the Coming Home Well podcast. We're going to be talking about brain donation on this monthly conversation. And today I'm very fortunate to have a great couple with us, Jan and Mike Pieraccini. Jan, Mike, thanks so much for being here today.
Well, thank you.
Really
We're
appreciate
excited
it.
to be here.
Good deal. I also want to thank you in advance for agreeing to share your story and that of your son. I feel like I need to apologize a little bit because I know while there's value in having these conversations and sharing what you've been through, it can also be a little bit tough. So thank you for putting yourself out there. Appreciate it much. So this is about your son, Ryan, and your decision to donate his brain. If you don't mind, tell me a little bit about him first. He was a Marine, right?
Yes,
Okay.
18 and a half years in the Marine Corps. Medically retired in 2015 as a gunnery sergeant. And that's why our foundation is called Gunny's Warriors. His nickname was Gunny, and everyone called him either Bud, Ryan, or Gunny. That's what his three nicknames were. His given name is Ryan, of course, and his nickname Bud is from his years in school growing up. He was everybody's buddy. His motto, best way to describe him, and he described himself this way, is that there was no such thing as a stranger. It was just a friend he hadn't met. And he was very outgoing, very athletic, a big guy. He was 6'4" and Ryan filled the room. You knew when Ryan was around. And he was that way from the very beginning, when he was little even. So athletics were his first love. And then he went to San Diego State, hoping to be a history teacher and a baseball coach, and came home back to Northern California and stayed with us for a while, and kind of was, at that stage where he didn't know exactly what he wanted to do. And he came home one day and said, I'm joining the Marine Corps. And it was perfect for him. Mike's a Air Force veteran, and so we come from a long line of proud military people, so it just seemed natural. And Ryan took to it and excelled and was promoted fast, and it just became his whole life.
Wow.
And when he was injured in Iraq, in a TBI blast, IED blast, and he struggled to stay in the Marine Corps, but they medically retired him at 18 and a half years.
Wow. How old was he?
He was, at that time, oh gosh, I got to count back now. He was in his late
43.
when he no.
Yeah.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he joined the Marine Corps late. Usually people do it. He was 21 or 22 when he joined. So, so that's when we started seeing the changes in him.
Tell me about the changes.
Due to the injuries that he had physical injuries to his body, but basically he looked normal on the outside, but the blast to his, he had a traumatic brain injury, changed everything for Ryan. His purpose in life was gone because he wasn't in the Marine Corps taking care of his Marines. And so he struggled, physically and emotionally. And he had the symptoms he had headaches, he had sensory overload, cognitive issues. In the beginning, there was isolation and depression and anxiety. He was married. I had a stepson and a daughter. The marriage didn't last because of his struggles. He struggled in all relationships, even as close as we were, he struggled with us too. And we struggled to help him. We didn't, we knew what was going on, but it was so surface, not like we know now, the understanding. And that segues in, to the brain donation. So Ryan struggled for a couple of years when he got out. And then as we learned more about his injuries and what that involved, and he learned, that determination came back, that dedication to helping others, especially veterans, came back, and his whole life became dedicated to helping his brothers and sisters in arms. And he co-founded
22 till 9
in the San Antonio area. He became a court advocate for veterans that got into the court system and was struggling. He was a ranch manager at a ranch that at the time was dedicated to wounded warriors. He just was involved. It was full-time. We hear stories about how he'd get a call from a veteran who was suicidal and having issues that lived, 2,
3, 4 hours away. It
Yeah.
didn't matter.
It didn't matter what time. He would drive down there and stay with them, and he wouldn't just help them get through the crisis. He would follow up and be their advocate. And if they needed housing, or they needed counseling, or they needed help with the VA, or he did that. And so
What a remarkable guy. While he's struggling with his own,
yes, but
issues.
it
It does help
helped
you
heal.
come outside of yourself a little bit,
Yes.
doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So his latest venture dream was to open a veteran center, kind of a resource center where veterans could hang out, play video games, get counseling, get help with housing, medical, whatever they needed. He would have this. And so at the time of his death, he was going to school to become a counselor so that he could counsel veterans.
Yeah.
So one of the symptoms that showed up later was cardiac issues. He was a young man, 46, 47 at the time, started having cardiac issues, was in and out of the hospital with that. And
As a result of the blast?
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I don't know, it's kind of a long answer to your question about our
Oh, that's
son.
good. Yeah.
I'm segueing into the brain donation. What happens with a blast injury is that there is astrogeal scarring of the brain that's unique and distinct with a blast injury versus, say, a car accident, TBI. And unfortunately, it's only not diagnosed in the living. It's only post-mortem. And so this scarring creates all the symptoms that Ryan and so many of our other veterans have. And so with that, they're proving that the cardiac issues come, and strokes. And Ryan suffered a massive stroke October 31st of 2020. And we made this decision to let him go November 8th, 2020.
It's not even 2 years.
No.
Wow. Where was he when it happened?
He lived in New Braunfels and was treated initially locally and then transferred to St. Luke's Hospital in San Antonio, wonderful neurological hospital. And at that point, the damage was too severe.
I understand.
So when Ryan was struggling, when he first got out of the service, he would tell me, Mom, we need to talk about what I want if something happens to me. And being his mom, I didn't really want to talk about that. But he persisted. And so a couple of times he spoke to me about what he wanted if something happened to him. And, you know, I put it in the back of my mind like we do with those kind of conversations, and didn't really think about it. And then when Ryan passed, we did think about, you know, the usual donations that are on the driver's license kind of thing. We knew he had that. And so the night he passed, a good friend of his and ours, Sue, and you're going to do an interview with her also. She, in our phone conversations that night, she gently reminded me that Ryan wanted to donate his brain.
It's a tough conversation to have at the time, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm so grateful that she reminded us that in the conversations that I had had with Ryan and we had had with him, that he too, I mean, in addition to the typical donations, he was very clear about wanting to donate his brain. And we called the DOD Brain Repository. And well, actually, Sue called them in our behalf. They called us that night. We had a 40-minute interview. A team was already on their way from Bethesda to San Antonio, and it was all done for us.
Wow. Wow. How did that make you feel?
Good. I mean, we were, of course, in shock and trying to cope with the loss of our son. And for us to know that his wishes were taken care of completely, it brought us peace, it brought us comfort.
I hear you. I hear you.
It was immeasurable at the time. At the time, you know, you're kind of just running on autopilot. And we had no idea the blessings that would come from this donation. And, you know, our foundation and the people that we've come to know, and the ripple effect of Ryan's brain donation in so many ways, it's immeasurable. It's given us purpose. It's given us a goal, all because of this.
That's amazing. It's just an amazing story that you tell, and the fact that, you know, that it's had such a positive impact on your lives is really a credit to you all for making it that way. I know what you're saying. I haven't been in your exact situation, as you know, although we do have a lot of service members in the family. But when my dad passed, you know, it sounds corny to people to say this, but there is a sense of comfort knowing that something good may come from this terrible, terrible loss. And they say that to me too. And I'm like, oh, good, because I hoped you would feel that. Do you know what I mean? And I feel that for you, that I hoped you would feel that after all that suffering, you know, you may be in a position to remove some of that for future generations because of the generosity of what you did. You know, did you learn anything about Ryan's brain afterwards?
Oh, yes, quite
Tell
a bit.
me.
Well, we knew we wanted to continue Ryan's work with the veterans. But we just didn't have any direction. We just didn't. And fortunately, the San Antonio area is saturated with veteran organizations. You know, it's Military USA. And so we struggled. What can we do that's a little bit different, that's not already out there? You know, how are we going to continue Ryan's legacy? So his brain was donated, like I said, to the DoD Brain Repository. And their studies are strictly for veterans. And they are studying the ramifications of blast injuries to the brain, the TBIs. And so they were very gracious. They stayed in touch with us. They would send out emails to us. We got a couple of phone calls. Our family was assigned an advocate who stayed in touch with us. It was just, and they said, the findings on Ryan's brain will take a while, please be patient. But it wasn't like they just went away. They stayed in touch and all that. We finally got the findings in a letter, and the letter was signed by Dr. Daniel Pearl, who is the head researcher of this program. Very personable, very caring. You could tell in the letter that he cared in the work. He's dedicated his life to this work. That was followed up by a phone call from Dr. Pearl personally, which meant the world to us, because the letter was very informative, but it also left questions, and so the follow-up with the phone call was important to us. And what that did, he explained what interface astroglial scarring is, that Ryan had a severe case of it. And what that did for the family and everyone that knew him, it kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together with his symptoms and his struggles. Everything went, oh yeah, we all went, that makes sense now, So then he told us that the work he was doing, how important it was, and that him and his staff were open to us for anything. And he would follow up. Well, Mike and I immediately started, Googling and studying all about this scarring and the effects. And it was like, it was meant to be. We didn't know what we were going to do to continue Ryan's work. And then it became obvious to us that we had to get the word out about, there's many prongs to what we're doing, and we're still growing. It's called Gunny's Warriors, and, awareness of the blast injuries and the scarring, but most importantly, the brain donation. We're getting the word out like you've advocated. Most people assume that brain donation is part of the driver's license donation program, and it is not.
That's the number one question I get, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
So our advocacy about the brain donation is that, to make people aware. And it's an uncomfortable situation, a conversation to have at first.
Right.
Here we are, we've got our booth up at a festival, everybody's having a great time, and we want to talk about brain donation, but it immediately, they're fascinated. They want to know more. People want to know more. People are, good inside. They want to do good. They want to help. They want to donate. Everybody, most people have no hesitation about checking that box on their driver's license. And once you explain to them about brain donation, same thing. They want to know where they sign up, especially veterans, because Dr. Pearl said something to us that stays with us. And it's the fact that Ryan continues this to this day and will continue forever because of his brain donation to serve his country and his fellow veterans.
You are remarkable. You are remarkable. I just am so moved by what you're telling me. And in some ways, I feel like, not having had the exact same experience by a long shot, I didn't see a loved one suffer for years and struggling, to overcome this horrible thing. But we're living parallel lives right now, you and me, which is kind of kind of nutty. I mean, we have the same conversations with people.
Yes,
Um, you know, I love that they're learning so much about these blast injuries and what it produces, because you know what that'll lead to? Someday they'll learn how to reduce the scarring. You know,
yes,
someday they'll learn how to mitigate that damage, and it won't be nearly as devastating.
no,
One of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because honestly, you and I are preaching to the choir right about now,
yes,
um, is that I also want military families, everybody actually, to understand that, you know, while there's a specific place to go for injuries like your son's, um, they still need what they call unaffected control brains a
yes,
lot, you know, a whole lot. And so I just want people who've been through what you've been through, and everybody else, to recognize that even though you're not carrying around a disorder or a disease or an injury, that the tissue that's rattling around inside your skull right now is just as valuable,
yes,
because they need them in every single study. You need comparison tissue, you know. And one of the things, because you've been in the trauma situation of it actually happening, one of my fears is that there's a big, you've heard of the Brain Initiative, that giant study out there that's multi-stakeholders. They're going to need a whole lot of, you know, unaffected control tissue. And
yes,
those are people that don't die from a disease or a neurologic thing. And so many of them will die in accidents. And so for this is what keeps me up at night. For so many people, the first time they're going to even learn about brain donation, because you know, you talk to people, they're like, what, brain donation? I didn't know that was a thing, right? The
mhm,
first time they're even going to learn about it is when someone comes to them and asks them to consent to donate a loved one's brain, and they haven't even wrapped their head around the fact that that person's gone. So it's
right,
going to be too hard and too traumatic to say, yes, go ahead, I understand the value. But if they've had one conversation in advance or learned about it from you or anybody that's come in contact with you, they have a greater chance of saying, oh, I've heard that's important. Maybe we
yes.
should do that. So, yeah.
And pre-registration is huge, because it should be as mainstream as, you know, organizing your funeral and paying for your burial site and it, you know, your will. It
Yeah,
should be just as mainstream as that, because the last thing the family wants to do, you know, and like you said, time is of the essence. When you lose
right.
a loved one, donation is, they can't wait around for you to think about this,
No,
right? So
right.
to make that decision before anything happens is paramount to your family, to the well-being of your family. It
Absolutely.
just takes care of all that. And so they know for a fact that that's what you wanted, because you're pre-registered, or you know, you've registered, and all of that is so important. So
I couldn't agree with you more, as you know. Plus,
yes,
in the way for DoD, I totally get that, and it's so awesome that your son is the one that brought it up with you. You know what I mean? He's the guy who said, "Listen, you know, we got to figure this out a little bit, and I might be able to play a role in that if you'll help me get this done," right? And
yes,
it's like that. It's like that for so many other things. I am constantly amazed at the generosity of people who, you know, they're doing this because they don't want other people to have to keep suffering. It's the most selfless thing you can do on your way out the door, is
yes.
what I say to families, because it really is. Did you have to explain it to people? Was there anyone in your life who was like, "What are you doing and why are you doing this?"
No, people that knew Ryan, I mean, it just, oh, figures, you know, it just was a natural thing. Now, with his daughter, who was 11 at the time,
Oh,
I wanted this to be, you know, we wanted this to be as normal as possible in the process of grieving, of losing her father. And so he donated, well,
He
pretty much,
donated his whole body.
yes.
Yeah.
So we got letters not just from Dr. Pearl, but, the Tissue Donation Center and the cornea. So there's a letter about how 2 people are seeing because of him, and burn victims because of, skin and bone grafts because of, so, and they actually one organization sent a plaque. And so we kind of struggled at first, how are we going to let her know what her daddy's done? And so we gathered all this stuff, and one day when she was visiting us, we presented it to her, and it was like, oh yeah, that sounds like my dad, kind of, it was comfort for her. There was no weirdness or, any kind of, it was very comfortable. It was a natural thing. And so we feel good about doing that, and explained each process. And when we got to the brain donation, she kind of looked at us a little hesitant, but then we just explained it to her. And, she was so involved. They were divorced, and Ryan and her were inseparable. And so she went to, a big part of her life was going to veteran organizations. And I mean, on Saturday, they'd go pick up the veterans that were that had community service to do, because he was a court advocate, and they go out to the ranch and work on the ranch. And she was right there. And, the veteran community was part of her life. And so to understand why he did what he did, donating his brain, it just was natural to her. And so I think it's all in how you approach it, and the stigma behind nobody wants to talk about donating their brain. And that's this, kind of thing that is uncomfortable. But that's part of our goal, isn't it? Is to remove that.
Yeah. And it's amazing how kids get it. To me, it's
Yes.
just amazing how kids get it. There's none of that preconceived, whatever. I mean, there's another family that I've worked with that she had a 12-year-old grandson, and so when she donated her husband's brain, one day they're in the car and he says, "You know what, Grandma? I think I understand that you did this so that other boys aren't going to lose their grandpa like I did." And now that kid's studying to be a neuroscientist. You know what I mean? It's like, oh man, you talk about the things that are formative for our kids, and then what they teach us back about,
Yes.
of course, this makes sense. What a wonderful girl. What a
Yes.
wonderful girl.
Yes.
That's fantastic. But nobody really gave you a hard time. Everybody's like, oh, I get what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's fun. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So what else does Gunny's Warriors do? I heard about some journals. I love that idea.
Yes. So what we're doing, the aspect of promoting the brain donation is, and we're working with DOD to actually have a laptop when we set up a booth, so that we can show them, we have all the literature and all this. And then we would like to have it so that they register right then. So I've been doing all the talking because he's a quiet guy, but I want, he really can explain the book much better than I can. So
tell me about it, Mike. Tell me.
So it's not gonna
Hold it back by your head.
No,
Oh, that's not working either. Sorry.
Anyhow, this is a logbook that in the military, when we go out in the field, everybody's given these books. So everybody we meet at functions that we're at, and we have these books out, they know exactly what they are, because we've all seen them. And these are the exact books that are that the military uses. So in talking with Dr. Pearl, we told him what we were trying to do with Gunny's Warriors, to put the awareness out about the interface esophageal scarring, and the brain donations. And we asked him, he thought that was a great idea. And we asked him if there was anything, any help we could get from him or things he'd like to see. And the one thing he mentioned was, it'd be great to have a journal from somebody, whoever wants to donate their brain, if they could put down, when they were injured and follow up with their symptoms throughout their lives and keep a journal that would go with their brain at their time of death. So he would have history to look at. So we talked about it. And if you tell a GI that, you'd like him to journal, he's just going to look at you funny.
Write down my feelings. Yeah.
Yes. Even though you could explain it well, but if we say we'd like you to, this is a logbook, something that they all recognize, and you keep a log of the history that and the symptoms and what that you have throughout your life, and if you decide to donate your brain, that this would go with it to help in the studies for come up with.
That's perfectly logical. It's like recording your activities in the field, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And it we have a whole box of these things, and if we get one or two people, we feel it's a win for us, somebody who's really into this. So that's what we've done, and we've handed out every function we go to, we hand out a few of these books.
I imagine that's very valuable to science. I mean, we talk about it in our organization. Anytime there's preclinical data on a brain, it makes it so much more valuable. And that's exactly what this is. This is preclinical data. I mean, those are as real as symptoms as any biosamples they would take,
Absolutely. Yes.
That's awesome.
So, so we have the books out. We have a table out that has all the literature out. And the books are there. When somebody sees them that knows what they are, they'll ask about them. And that's when, if they're interested, we have a board that we display. Dr. Pearl had a PowerPoint that he put out about the effects of blast trauma on the brain. And there's some diagrams and showing how it affects the brains. So we have that up, and we can discuss all that with people when they stop by. And then we talk about the book, and every now and then we'll get somebody who's been through a TBI, has had a TBI with a blast trauma, or who was a mortarman, or who was in the tanks, or just in our everyday training in the military, when you do room clearing and you're using flashbangs and stuff to go in. So you're getting some sort of blast, big or small, but you're getting some sort of blast trauma. And over time, that can accumulate in the brain and cause more damage. So it's what we talk about, and then we talk about the symptoms with them. PTSD is a huge, a lot of the guys coming back have PTSD. And, the symptoms are very similar. They're the same symptoms with this scarring on the brain. So if you have PTSD, or that's the box everybody's put in. And like Jan said earlier, we're trying to remove that stigma. It's not, everybody looks at PTSD as a psychological, trauma or problem, where this is a physical damage to the brain. It's a physical, the symptoms you're having are due to the physical damage. It's not a psychological damage. So we just want to give everybody that information so they can go back to their, healthcare provider and talk to them about it, or help them in their treatment with their symptoms, to know where it's coming from. And hopefully they can find some way to treat it so they can, live in a better space.
Right. You guys have done amazing work. You found the gap when you were saying you were trying to come up with what can we do to serve without being redundant, and what a terrific way to identify and then bring it home to veterans with the logbook. It's perfect. So are you working just in the Texas area, or are you going all over the place?
Well, right now we're just starting. So we started last October, but we've had a few breaks in there with some other things that have come up. So
Sure.
we're trying to bring it, gear back up and get it going. And I talked to a guy we met last year, another organization who works with TBI. His organization is TBI Warriors. He's a wealth of information. And he told me he just focuses he has an area in South Texas that he focuses in. He says for him, because it's a smaller organization like ours is, he says you need to focus locally. Start out locally. He says you can't try to just jump in there and go nationwide. There's a lot of work involved in this.
There is.
So it made a lot of sense.
It's kind of an intimate conversation too, don't you think? I feel like it's personal. It's real personal to talk to somebody about this. They're going to have questions. You can't leave them hanging. A lot of people do. So I get that. I have a sciencey question to ask for you. This always makes me twitch when people say that to me because I'm not the scientist. But there are many kinds of TBI, right? So the blast injury is different from, repeated head trauma. Are the effects the same? Is it the same scarring that's created, or is this really
No, it's not. It's
wow, the blast is unique. Yeah,
the blast is unique, and he's compared. Dr. Pearl's compared it with, accident victims, with sports players in sports that have CTE.
Yeah,
it's a different type of scarring. It's a different injury.
Wow.
A lot of similarities with CTE, but he's done the studies with the military for CTE, and then the blast scarring and the blast damage, and it's different. And the number of troops with CTE is a lot in these blast studies is smaller.
That's fascinating. That's really fascinating. Yeah, you guys are awesome. I love what you're doing. And even though you're pushing the science of it, what it is so supportive to the community at large, especially for guys like your son. And that's a personality type in the military, one to take care of their people and protect and serve, And so the idea that they can have an impact on making people healthier down the road there's some real beauty in that.
And that's when we were introduced to you and your organization. We were so excited about the work you're doing too.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like we could collaborate a lot, and I definitely will want to talk to you further about that when we're finished with this. So I can't thank you enough. You have made my week with this conversation. I'm so thrilled with what you're doing. And while I have no right to be, I'm so proud of you for taking this situation and improving humanity by your involvement with it. So,
well, Ryan wouldn't have it any other way. He wouldn't want us sitting home, grieving and not taking care of his vets.
Yeah, that's wonderful. All right, let's end on that note.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Coming Home Well podcast with your guest host, Tish Hevel. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and a review. If you're interested in pre-registering for brain donation, please visit braindonorproject.org. Follow us on Instagram at ComingHomeWellPodcast_BTS. Thank you for listening to Coming Home Well.